Hi everyone, I'm Miss Gian, and today we will be discussing little bit disagree different, maybe very technical, and the concepts here are leaning towards the sciences than the social sciences, so more on the biological aspects of things. So we're looking into the inside, no, the cells responsible for making us think what we think, making us feel what we feel, making us how we react. Of course, not as simple na ang cause jud no are certain hormones are causing ang cause sa pagkasakit no sa ato ang heart kay kung ma-broken hearted ta or ato ang giddiness na ma-feel is just because of the chemicals in our brain. There's a whole lot to it that we can cover. But we will look at the smallest aspect ba. How does certain cells cause no some or influence no, the way we think, the way we act, the way we interact with the world, as well as the chemicals in our bodies, the hormones, and the brain structures responsible for a lot of human behavior. So, in a sense, we'll be touching a little bit sa topic sa neuroscience ani na chapter. So our goal for today is to understand neuron, which is the main cell of the nervous system, and we will look into the nervous systems, which are the central and peripheral, the two kinds, and we'll look at how hormones shape behavior and emotion, how it influences our emotions, and we'll also explore different brain structures and how psychologists study these brain structures. So our first objective is to understand neurons and nerves. So, unsa man din ang neurons? Neurons are the body's messenger. So your nervous system is basically a network of cells that carries information all over your body. And ang star ng Pasko, no, of that network is your neuron. So again, it is the body's messenger. Now, asa diri ang neuron? Is this the neuron? Dili, no? These are your dendrites. Is this the neuron? Dili mo na ang nucleus. Is this the neuron? No, it's not. It's your axons. Okay? So, usa ding neuron? This is your neuron. And it is composed of three major parts. We have the dendrites, we have the cell body, this one here, or what we call the soma, and we have the axon. And I'll talk about them one by one. So, start sa tasa dendrite. Ang dendrite is tree-like iyahang forma, no? They're the ones who receive the messages from the other cells. So we're just looking at one neuron here, a microscopic view of a neuron, and sila ang receive sa messages sa ubang neurons pod. And ang cell body, now the soma, is the one who who processes these incoming messages because it is the command center. And once it's processed by the soma, no, the message received from the other neuron, it now travels into the axon. So think of it as a telephone wire. And so then the axon is a long cable that carries the messages to other cells. So padong diri no sa synaptic end bulbs in its axon terminal. Dili ra ang neurons ang the only cell sa nervous system. We also have what we call the glial cells. Now, what are the glial cells? Glial cells are, I wouldn't say assistant cells, pero mura siya giga na iyang function. But ultimately, it also affects our thinking, our memory, etc. So, unsa ning types of glial cells? Now, we have the oligodendrocytes, and we also have the Schwann cells. Okay, so I did not put it here, so please listen carefully. What are these? Okay, so ang functions of glial cells, a lot. Again, mura siyag assistant, no? So, mura siyag mag-assist siya in creating new neurons, mag-provide siya og insulation. Oligodendrocytes is an example again of a glial cell. It provides an insulation for new neurons. It also cleans up dead neurons. So glial cells then are also found to influence some disorders. So the scientists, they found out na people with schizophrenia has a lot of glial cells, whereas those with MDD or major depressive disorder have lower numbers of glial cells. Okay? So I mentioned that oligodendrocytes are responsible for is a type of a glial cell. Now, oligodendrocytes produces what do you call this? Myelin sa brain and spinal cord. So, unsa na myelin, no? Myelin is the fatty coating that speeds messages up. So, again, it is made by oligodendrocytes sa parts sa brain and cord, and ang responsible sa rest of the body is Schwann cells. Nagtunga na si oligo o si Schwann sa Schwann, ikaw sa rest of body ha, ako sa brain o spinal cord. Now, sa ang myelin, no? Ang myelin na gi-generate ni Schwann has a special feature. Okay? iPhone 17 Pro Max. Okay, so ang iyang myelin, it serves as a tunnel that allows damaged nerve fibers to repair and reconnect themselves. So in a real life example, the Schwann cells myelin is responsible for kana regeneration kung maputlan tag kamot. As long as as long as makonect dayon siya in a timely basis, di ba? Maputlan kag kamot, niya imong doktor atong ER patahi dayon. So the reason why in a timely basis kung matahi na siya maayo ra ka, ma-regenerator na siya and magamit ra nimo balik imuhang kamot is because of Schwann cells. Right? So amazing kaayo ato ang body. So sa next slide, we look at how a neuron fires. Okay, so unsaon di ay nila pag-send og messages. Remember the two terms or the two states sa neuron. So there is the resting potential and there is the action potential. So unsa nang resting potential? So resting potential is when the neuron is charged up but sitting still. So imagine your phone no in your table. So murag ing ana, no, it's just sitting still. But it's not really doing anything. It's not pinging notification. It's not so baka it's just there. Action potential then is when it already fires. So the electrical charge shoots down the axon, and that's where the neuron is sending its message. And most of us thinks ba, at the first glance, if you look at the two, you would think na, okay, kung kusog imong na-feel, say, pain receptors, kusog imuhang na-feel sa kuan, so kusog kayo ang firing sa neuron. No, that's not a correct way to put it. Ano man, it's all or nothing ang firing sa neuron. So, kung walay neuron nga mo fire, so, meaning anak, walay neuron na mo fire o hinay lang or walay neuron na mo fire o kusog jud kaayo. Okay, again, it's all or nothing. It either fires completely or it doesn't fire at all. So, unsa man ang difference kung kusog ang stimulus? There's two. Okay, frequency, number one, and number two is recruitment. At sa frequency. So, frequency, sa gunso na, no, ang firing. Sa gunso ang, I want you to imagine a firework, okay? So, frequency meaning kadaghan nagpabuto. So, mo po na ang neuron, no? A stronger stimulus doesn't make a bigger action potential. Okay, so meaning di ay kung kusog ang pain na imong mabati, meaning the stimulus is strong. It's not the other way around na ang firing ang strong. If your stimulus is strong, then sagunso ang pagpapabuto, sagunso ang firing. Okay? If weak ang stimulus, meaning nag-touch nimo sa kettle niya, dili ra kay nga nakainit, of course, you will not feel any pain, right? So, weak man ang stimulus. So, ang firing ana, hinahinay lang. Okay? Tiglima baron ka spikes per second. So, again, the difference is in the stimulus strength. Now, recruitment. Let's look at recruitment. We have the analogy of the firing as the pabuto, right? The fireworks. So in the new year, dili raman ikaw ang magpabuto. Imong mga imong silingan magpabuto po, 'di ba? Pikas kanto magpabuto, mga hotels magpabuto. So ingana po ang neurons. The stronger the stimulus, the more neurons fire at the same time. So daghan kaayog signal sa utok na sakit na jud kaayo, sakit na jud kay siya sa heart, 'di ba? Okay? Nga naman jud ta sa example sa heart, no? I will give you an example na kanang close to you kay inyong age kay nabe mo sa kanang isolation versus intimacy bitaw. So example na amo sa jeep niya, namoy nakita na couple sa atbang naghinilakay. Okay, and you notice, you look away sa gawas, nakuha dahil nimo imong attention sa buang na napataka ng panumbag. Meaning, dali ra kaayo na divert inyong attention. Meaning, weak ang stimulus, weak ang input. So, ang stimulus, wala siya kaabot sa threshold. So, there's no firing, wala po mo na-feel na sakit. Okay? So, sa case 2, ang stimulus kusog-kusog na siya. Okay? Baguhay pa jud ka na buwagan. Okay? So, and pag scroll nimo sa imong cellphone, nakakita din ka sa picture ninyong duha. Or nakadungog dayo kag kanang kanta ninyong duha, di ba? So, kusog kaayo ang stimulus. Ang threshold nimo pod medyo baba pa day 1 kay bago pa man mo nakakuan, nagbuwag. Okay? There's again, no, there's kanang lots of firing now. Okay? The threshold is crossed. Now, the action potential runs. Again, remember the all or nothing law. It's why kanang dili ka maka half remember sa inyong memories, char. Bitaw. So sa frequency sa day 1, ang circuit is firing again and again and again kay bago pa man, no? Hundreds of times per second. And inig day 90 or say day 365, 1 year after 1 year, it fires once then subsides. So kadyot ra kayo siya. So meaning naka-move on na. So we look at the recruitment, the second recruitment. So sa day 1, it's not just one circuit, no, dagan kaayog naka-trigger lo, emotion, your memory. Okay? So dagan kaayog kanang firing at all over the kanang places, no, all over the nerves. And so siya kusog, no, kusog ang kanang ma-feel na signal. But sa day 90, gamay na lang siya ang firing. Faded na ang memory, di ba? So, ang grabe nakasakit na imong ma-feel, it does not mean that the neurons firing is so strong. It just means na sa gunso ang pag-fire o dagan ang nag-fire na neurons. Okay? So moving on to the next slide, we will talk about the synapse. So ang kaning neurons, as you can see here, there is a gap. Okay? So meaning to say they don't touch. So how do they get the message across? Di ba? Kay kung iputol nimo ang telephone wire, dili naman mo gana ang telephone. So before we discuss this, let's go back to the parts sa neuron. So this we're already here, di ba? Naa sila yung message na makuha ang dendrites, mo travel here, and maabot here. Now, this is a larger view of the synaptic terminals. Okay, here, remember this one, synaptic end bulbs. So, mo ni siya, one of the synaptic end bulb. So, what happens is, the signal reaches the end of the axon, which is this one here, the end bulb, and then the neuron then will release the neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are the chemical messengers. So kani sila, naana sila sulod sa synaptic vesicles. So you look at this kanang magagmay na dots here. And then when they are released from the bulb, they float. So mura sila passenger, no? Gihatod sila sa bus na nigawas sila sa bridge. So saan nila pag ato sa next site, there is a gate called the receptor site, and these neurotransmitters, they'll act like a key in a lock. So meaning to say, naara jay particular neurotransmitter ang masulod aning receptor site. You understand that later, we'll discuss that, don't worry, in the next few slides. Now, there we have these terms called the agonists and antagonists. So this is referring to any chemical substances that will boost or reduce the effect of a neurotransmitter. So mo ana tag agonist meaning gi-boost niya ang effect sa neurotransmitter. Kung antagonist gi-block niya ang effect sa neurotransmitter. Unsa din ang neurotransmitter, miss? Chemical messengers that have superpowers. Okay? So, ako na siya ka ng giingana no para madali siya masabtan. So, usay mga superpowers sa neurotransmitter. Ganda-ganda klase sa neurotransmitter. One of it is ACH. Okay, so we have here an example. So ACH is a type of neurotransmitter. So unsa day superpower sa neurotransmitter? Unsa iyahang function? ACH has a lot of function, but it's well known for its function sa skeletal muscles. No, it stimulates the skeletal muscles to contract but actually slows contractions in the heart muscle. So it doesn't mean to say na mao na primary function niya, mao na gid na. Okay, it will depend on where it is produced and at which site of the body. Now, a curare poison that is used sa blow darts sa South American Indians, it acts as an antagonist to ACH. Why? No, curare's molecules are similar enough to ACH to fit into the receptor site, blocking ACH. Okay, so mo na siyang ma-paralyze ang mga tao na maigo sa blow darts. So remember this one here. Meaning to say, ang curare molecules, mumimik siya sa naong sa ACH. Niya, mo-block siya sa mga receptor sites, so dili na noon kakaon or dili nakasulod ang ACH sa body. And because ACH is its superpower is naa sa skeletal muscles, so mo na siyang ma-paralyze ang kung kinsa man maigo sa blow dart. So then, the curare poison is an antagonist for ACH because again, it blocks the effect of a neurotransmitter or it reduces the effect. Now, let's look at the example of a black widow spider. The spider has a venom. Okay? Once mapaakan mo ana niya, a venom sorry. So once mapaakan mo ana niya, ang spider mo release og excessive amount. No? So the venom of the spider triggers an excessive release of ACH. So meaning, madaghan maayo ang ACH, the venom then is an agonist for ACH. Now remember, too much of a neurotransmitter is also bad because an excessive amount of ACH can cause convulsions and even death. Okay, that is how we look at antagonist and agonist with regards to neurotransmitter. So, unsa di ay ang mga functions sa neurotransmitters? Okay, what are other neurotransmitters and what are their functions or main functions or the functions they are known for? So, remember ha, I want to stick it into your head na dili ra na usa ang function sa neurotransmitter. Number 1, daghan na siyag function. Example, norepinephrine, no? As kuan na siya sa alertness, sa focus, and then boost na siya sa memory. Dopamine and different sites may cause schizophrenia for some. It will also cause Parkinson's disease, okay? It differs ang iyahang unsa ang iyang excess, meaning sobraan pa siya or gamay siya og kung asa siya na-release na site. Pero ato lang ni siyang gi-simplify here. Kay again, dili man ta med student, no? So, ACH again is excitatory or inhibitory. It's involved in arousal, attention, memory, and control muscles contraction. Norepinephrine, mainly excitatory, involved in arousal and mood. Dopamine, excitatory or inhibitory, involved in control of movement and sensations of pleasure. So dopamine, you keep on hearing this one online, no? When there a notification, your dopamine spikes because dopamine's one of the function of dopamine is to release pleasure. And serotonin or 5-HT, it's either excitatory or inhibitory. It's involved in sleep, mood, anxiety, and appetite. So later on, I'll discuss about the SSRI, so selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. But for now, let's proceed to GABA, no? GABA aminobutyric acid. So it's a major inhibitory neurotransmitter. It is involved in sleep and inhibits movement. So alcohol then is a agonist for GABA because it's involved in sleep. Manang too much of alcohol, makatugon ta, and dili na ta kalihok. And glutamate, no, major excitatory neurotransmitter. It's involved in learning, memory formation, nervous system development, and synaptic plasticity. And endorphins is inhibitory neural regulators. It's involved in pain relief. So when you hear the na exercise releases endorphins, so meaning to say, i-increase niya ang endurance sa imuhang pain. So most of the athletes when they're do especially for endurance sports, a lot of endorphins is released mo na dili na sila kabati og sakit. No, they will not feel the pain sa ilang legs. Unsa pa na din ha because of endorphins. Okay? So unsa day role no sa drugs? Why are we all discussing this, miss? I don't understand how it is beneficial or how it is even connected to psychology. So it's important to understand this because understanding the role of neurotransmitters and the process of everything makes us understand the effects of drugs, and especially relevant to substance induced disorders, no, and some medications that will improve, example, anxiety, ADHD, or depression. Karon, unsaon day pag-clean up sa neurons? So once a neurotransmitter is released, kailangan na siya i-clean up, otherwise dili maka-create og another kanang potential, no, action potential, dili makakuan send og another message. So how do neurons clean up the neurotransmitters? There's three. We have the reuptake process, the diffusion, and the enzymatic degradation. So for diffusion, diri sa tauna, no, for malanay lang sila, no, mukalit lang sila kawa. Mawagtang lang gyud sila for some. Now, for reuptake process, no, it involves what do you call this? Protein para suyupon siya balik sa synaptic vesicles. So, ibalik siya sa iyahang kanang transportation. So, bali ang protein ang murag currency, no, sa entire thing. And for some, it's enzymatic degradation. So, meaning there are enzymes produced by the body to to lanay the neurotransmitter or to remove the kana neurotransmitter. So this is particularly relevant for ACH, okay? Kay dili man sila kahuwat sa reuptake process because it takes too long. So mo na siya. Okay? What happens to cocaine? Iyang i-block same as the curare poison, iyang i-block ang receptor sites for dopamine. So dopamine is removed from the synapse by a reuptake site. Cocaine acts by blocking dopamine reuptake sites, allowing dopamine to remain active in the synapse longer. All right, moving on to the next topic, which will be central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and the endocrine glands. Starting first with central nervous system. So our CNS is composed by two parts, ang brain and ang SC, or spinal cord. No? The brain interprets and stores information and then sends orders to muscles, glands, and organs. Okay? The command center nato ni siya. And the spinal cord is the highway connecting the brain to the rest of the body. So think of it as a pipeline where messages cross. So if relate na to na siya company, si brain ang chief executive, si spinal cord ang middle managers, no? Sila man ang kanang direct asa padung ang messages. So in the SC, you can see three types of neurons. We have the afferent or the sensory neuron. We have the number 2 is the efferent or the motor neurons. And number 3 is the interneurons. So ato sa tasa, efferent sensory neurons. So I want you to remember A as in arriving. Coming from the senses, mo carry na siya messages towards the spinal cord. Okay? And this is spinal cord dayon ang mo send og message and then mo exit na siya through the efferent neuron. No? It carry messages from the cord to the muscles and the glands. And unsa ni siyang so E as in exiting. Kung ganahan mo Bisaya na para ma-remember siya, A for adto didto. So, ang afferent sensory neurons na siya makuha ang receptors, makakuha og stimulation or stimulus na kanang agay init, no? So ang init, ang pain signal mo adto gikan sa afferent adto dito sa spinal cord. Si spinal cord dayon mo ingon na o kanang ikuha dayon nimo kamot. Reflex to remove the hand, going exit to the muscles, ingon sa spinal cord as in ingon, E-N-G-O-N, okay? So unsa nang interneurons, no? It sits in between the kuan, no? It connects the sensory to motor neurons. So here is a diagram for you to understand or to familiarize the roles of each. So you can see here ang motor neurons kind of like similar of what a neuron typically looks like. And sensory neuron usually has a receptor cell, and the interneuron usually has dendrites and then synaptic endings sa other side. I want you to remember that a nerve is not a neuron. Unsa man diin ang neuron? A neuron is a single individual nerve cell. So while a nerve is a large cable-like bundle made up of many long neuron fibers group. So then a neuron is a single wire or a single copper wire. A nerve is a thick cable filled with those wires. So a nerve then is composed of a lot of neurons. So looking into this one, why are we talking about nerves? Because padung na ta adto sa peripheral nervous system. So if this is our central nervous system, the spinal cord and the brain, these are our peripheral nervous system. From the word peripheral, at the periphery of our CNS. So, di na ta mo identify unsa to siya na mga type of nerves because that's already for biology students. So, unsa na siyang peripheral nervous system? It's everything outside the brain and the spinal cord. Now, it splits into two branches. The first branch is the somatic nervous system or the voluntary system. And then the other one is the autonomic nervous system or the automatic system. From the word itself, voluntary ang somatic. So, iyang i-control are the muscle groups, anything na makakontrol ka at your own will. But it does not mean na wala siya involuntary command. Especially for reflex type, let's go back to the CNS, nganong naatay reflex, no, na si spinal cord na ang mo-identify unsay buhaton. Kay kung muagi pa siya ni brain, madugay ang process, dako na noog damage katong nasunog imong kamot. So nakatouch kag kayo, ang mo process ana si spinal cord para diretso dayon ang reaction time, gamay ra ang damage sa imong kamot, ma-pull out dayon nimo imong kamot sa init na kayo. Mo na siya ang purpose sa reflex. So then we understand na ato ang somatic under the somatic system or the SNS, dili siya always voluntary. Naa siya commands na involuntary pod siya. And those are our reflex. We have it right after birth dayon, no? Mga anak ta, magawas ta sa womb sa atong mama, naa na dayon tay reflexes. Alright? Somatic naa siya duha ka buok pathway. So the first pathway is the sensory pathway. And the second pathway is the motor pathway. So ang pathway from the word itself, no, senses to the CNS. So kung nakay masimutan na flower, no, the sense of smell going to the group sa imuhang ilong, no, the muscle groups sa ilong imugi kuan ba ana no gismell niya ka smell ka sa fragrance of flower. That's the sensory pathway. Motor pathway, mingon ding brain ni mo, sige, kuha pag flower, no? Or smell more, kay I like that fragrant smell. So, mo smell, langhap na po kag air, no? That is the kanang CNS, no? The brain commanding you to open your nostrils again, no? And smell it one more time. So, to your muscles, alright? Or grab another flower and smell it and compare the smell of the rose sa smell sa daisy, nga na siya. Karon, autonomic nervous system is, from the word itself, automatic siya, autonomic. Okay? So usually ani mga internal organs kay alangan naman no na kailangan pag decision nimo to pump the blood sa imong heart or for your heart to pump sa kadaghan nimong buhaton no nya makatag sa pakaani nila. Of course, that's why the body designed the ANS. Kay mong pump na sila ilang own ang tract kay ay sani ang intestines mo constrict and kuan na siya na for the food to go here and to be processed. So again, usually mga internal organs ni siya ang kanang under the ANS or automatic system. So it runs the organs, the glands, and mga involuntary muscles, especially mga sphincters. Okay? So mga faucets sa bladder nato, sa kung asa pa na. And it has two, no? If kani siya na ay pathways, kani siya na ay duha pod ka kanang system, no? The divisions. We have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic na kuan. So, para asa na ang sympathetic na kanang, what do you call this, division? So, it's the fight or flight response. Going back, the sympathetic nervous system, siya ang fight or flight system. So, kanang, if you're faced with a threat, si sympathetic ang cause for why makadagan ka if gukdon ka og tiger or if na naggukod nimo why maka-react dayon ka, okay? Because your sympathetic then would signal you to either fight or to run, not to flight, the fight or flight system. So unsa ang parasympathetic no, it's your eat, drink and rest. So para think lang na niana mo sa jeep kuya para so meaning imong body no mobalik sa iyahang homeostasis, iyang normal functions. So in here we have a diagram. On the left side, we have the parasympathetic division, and on the right side, we have the sympathetic division. So, what usually happens when your parasympa is at work? This is our standard. Okay. So, normally, and most of the time, we are in our parasympathetic division is functioning rather. So, our pupils constrict and stimulates tear glands. It increases our salivation, slows down our heart rates, constricts our bronchi, increases digestive functions of our stomach, pancreas, and intestines, and allows bladder contraction. So this is our home base. When we are faced with a threat, no, if we're too stressed, our pupils dilate, no, and it inhibits tear glands. There's a decrease in salivation, increase in heart rate, dilates our bronchi so that we can get more air for our blood to pump to places that are needed for us to respond to the situation, and then decrease our digestive functions of stomach, pancreas, and intestines. So kinsa diri ang tig long run, no, tig marathon or tig hike or any endurance sports makabati mo na sometimes dili man mo gutom despite being fatigued. That is because your sympathetic division is at work. So gi-constrict niya ni so dili mo ka feel og any gutom. That's why right after the event, right after the hike or right after a stressful situation, maka-feel din mo og gutom balik. All right? So sympathetic hits the gas and parasympathetic hits the brakes. And for our body to function well, we need both division. On the next slide, there is a recap of all the parts of the nervous system. So let's go over them para maka-refresh atong memory. Again, the nervous system is divided into two. We have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Our CNS is composed of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain is our command center. The spinal cord is like the middle manager and it's responsible for the reflexes, no? For us, dili ma-damage ato ang mga bodily functions because it takes time na moagi pa siya sa brain. Okay? And going to the other side, the peripheral nervous system has two systems, the ANS or autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system, from the word itself, involuntary muscle groups, usually our intestines and our glands, or rather our internal organs and our glands. And our somatic nervous system is katong mga voluntary. So it is also divided into two, the sensory system or the afferent neurons and the motor system or the efferent neurons. Sensory system carries messages from the senses to the brain, and then motor system or the motor pathway carries messages from the brain to the muscles, and the glands. Okay? And the sympathetic and parasympa is under the ANS. Parasympathetic is our homeostasis, no, our functioning jud on a daily basis. So usually it maintains body functions under ordinary conditions. So its task is for us to save energy. So once we encounter a threat or it needs us to move something, our fight or flight response is because of our sympathetic division. So it prepares the body to react and expend energy in times of stress. So hope everything is clear on this part. So adto na pud ta sa endocrine system, the chemical mail. Now, we understand the functions of neurotransmitters. Remember, the neurotransmitters is inside a synaptic vesicle, produced in the synaptic gap and entered through receptor sites. Kay mura man siya giyawi. Na naray siya particular receptor site na masudlan. For endocrine, it releases hormones directly into the bloodstream. So mo na siya ang difference niya sa neurotransmitters. Although I would like you to remember, and this is important to note, that a hormone and a neurotransmitter can act as a hormone. So it has two functions. Example, epinephrine and norepinephrine can both function as a neurotransmitter and also a hormone. Alright? Sige, ato ta first sa pituitary gland. It's located sa ato ang brain and it's called the master gland. Okay, it controls all the other glands and the hypothalamus controls it. Okay? So, usa may mga i-release niya, oxytocin, the milk letdown reflex. It's a hormone is a hormone commonly for pregnancy, no, childbirth, and whatnot. No, it has various functions. And vasopressin helps the body conserve water. The growth hormone as well is released by the pituitary gland, regulates how big you get and how you develop. And the gonads or the gonadotropins, our pituitary is also responsible for triggering our sex hormones. So during puberty, if you've developed secondary characteristics already like nidako imong breast or nagka-buhok imong ilok, that is because of the glands release or the hormones released by the pituitary gland through the gonadotropins. All right? So what are other major glands? We have the pineal here located sa brain gahapon. It secretes melatonin, so it's responsible for our sleep-wake cycle. So katong mga insomniac or have sleep problems, usually if you're given a drug, they're trying to target the pineal gland or the production of melatonin. Now the thyroid is found in the neck, okay? So it's found here, the thyroid gland. So it releases thyroxine and it regulates growth and metabolism. So there are problems like hormonal problems caused by a defective thyroid, which we'll cover later on in the process. Or I believe in your developmental psychology, it will be covered there. Then gonads are your ovaries and testes, regulates reproduction and sexual development. So remember, si pituitary will affect this one, no, the gonads, no, the ovary and the testes. That's why it's the master gland kay mo influence man po siya sa development or release of hormones ani. And the adrenal has the medulla and the cortex. The medulla releases epinephrine and norepinephrine. So kani silang duha is responsible for your fight or flight. And then cortisol, now we keep on hearing this one, it is the stress hormone. So adrenal glands are located at the top of our kidneys. The word itself good means na on top of your kidneys. So mana siya ang other glands. So kanang makabantay mo na dili na mo ay kanang ika ano niyo ba na magkayo and then makadagan o makaisa o graph niya, makagawa siya, that is because of your cortisol. Now, we have a discussion question. Cortisol is useful in a short burst. It gives you energy to handle a threat, but students often live under stress for months. Also, also your professors. What might happen when the stress hormone never switches off? So, I have a kanang video here kanang highlighting what happens if we're constantly under stress. And if sa inyong GTS pod maka-discuss pod mo ani what happens if you're constantly under stress, mura mo rubber band na mo snap. Okay, you're stretched too thin and then mo snap dayon mo. So it's very very delicado to put your body constantly under stress. Okay? So think about that for a minute. Well, let's proceed to our last topic for today, which is the living brain. So we'll just go through this very briefly kay di kay siya kanid or it's not that useful later on. So anyways, the brain is studied through these kanang interventions. So we have lesioning. For example, sa laboratory rats, they're deliberately destroying a part of the brain ato nila to understand unsa na part di ay ang puan na brain, no? Responsible for that part ba na siya. So, panalitan nilang i-destroy ang amygdala and then they found out na ang mga rats na gi-destroy or gi-lesion ang amygdala kay nawagtang ilahang fear response to a threat. So, when they're sat beside a cat, dili sila mahadlok. So, another is brain stimulation or ESB. A mild current makes neurons fire and it doesn't have damage. So, this is a non-invasive na technique. And we also have deep brain stimulation used to treat Parkinson's disease, and TMS and TDCS stimulate from outside the skull. So you can just search for it sa toang resource what these terms mean. Also for brain imaging, studies are also conducted not to look at what particular parts fire or kanang lighten up when there is a certain stimuli. So for example, if they want to study the visual part of the brain, no, they're gonna look into these kanang imaging studies kung indeed ang occipital lobe ba gyud ang responsible if a certain visual stimuli is presented. So natay CT scan, no, natay fMRI, EEG, electrical activity, may mga magnetic fields, and PET, it tracks the kanang of the brain through radioactive glucose. And the fMRI tracks blood oxygen in real time. Sa ang brain, no, nganong bottom to top kay this also particularly relevant to the parietal lobe because ang part sa parietal, if you look at the bottom, ang function niya is sa topmost part sa human body. So, ang bottom, example, parietal ni. Ang bottom sa parietal, ang function niya, ang iyang kuan sa na function is ang tongue. And then magkataas, example, the shoulders, the arms or the hands, tapos the legs, no? So, inga na siya mo ng bottom to top ang ang brain. Pero it has three major parts. We have the hindbrain. It's the oldest, deepest part. And it runs the things that keeps us alive. For example, breathing, heartbeat, balance, and coordination. So, kanina part here, ang hindbrain. And then, ang limbic system. So, around this part, no, it sits under the cortex and it's our emotional core. It drives emotion, learning, memory, and motivation. And then the forebrain, or with this one here, the pinakadali na ma-identify na part, is the wrinkly outer layer. So, it's kanang split into two cerebral hemispheres, no? And it's joined by a thick cable of fibers called corpus callosum. So, all the higher order thinking happens in the cortex. So, let's look at the hindbrain, no? So, this part here, no? Again, this is the oldest brain, man pinaka-una ma-form. So, ang part sa hindbrain is the cerebellum, the pons, the medulla, and the reticular formation, or nana siya reticular activating system. So, ang cerebellum, its main function is coordination and balance. So, makakita mo ng mga skaters na mo skate, or kanang sa snowboarding, or kanang mudagan mo, no? Ang cause or why you're able to do that, it's because of the cerebellum. Kanang mo sakay mo move it or angkas niya, makita niyang wala mo'y gunitanan, no? Ang nakapabalance ninyo is because you have a good functioning cerebellum. Kasuway nga nung gi-example ko ng angkas no, kasuway jud ko ana nang move it ko no, wala man ni magunitan. Uy nya alangan na mamugakos ko ni Kuya Rider, di ba? So next is the pons, this one here. It's part of the hindbrain that relays messages between the cerebellum and the cortex. So it acts as sort of like the bridge. Okay, and then this one right here is the medulla. No, it's part of the hindbrain that controls heartbeat, breathing, and swallowing. So this part right here is very important. And of course, the the reticular formation, it's a system of nerves running from the hindbrain and through the midbrain to the cerebral cortex. It controls arousal and attention. So kanang it also is responsible why we can ignore repeated stimuli ba? Kay ma-override man gud ang system kung tanang stimuli atong ma-notice. Example, kanang track while you're studying. No, along the way, mag-study ka, di nakakabantay no sa mga truck ug motor na dagan. Mura na siya background noise, di nakaka-notice niya. So, reticular formation is responsible of that. Kanang mga noise sa electric fan or noise sa aircon. So, kung inyo na siyang dili na mabantayan, that's because of your reticular formation. This same can also be true. The opposite can also be true. So for example, ang mama no natulog siya na kanang bisag unsa na noise no di siya kamata, pero kung muhilak na iyang baby dara na siya kamata. So that is also because of the reticular formation. So that is the part of the hindbrain. So the limbic system is composed of the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the amygdala, the cingulate cortex, and the hippocampus. Start sa thalamus first. No? This is the part of the forebrain that relays information from sensory organs to the cerebral cortex. So kani si thalamus, mura na siya concierge. Siya mo na muingon na kanang sapol na stimuli from the eyes. Siya may sige adto ka sa occipital lobe i-process. Tapos na stimuli from the kanang skin no na kanang bugnaw. Sige adto ka sa parietal lobe. Ato lang dito ha. Sumura siya ana no mo siya secretary kuan. Siya mo relay og information. Except sa sense of smell no kay mo diretso na siya process sa olfactory bulbs. But the rest of the senses moagi pa na siya ni thalamus. Sa hypothalamus, naana siya right above the pineal gland. Remember, this is the pineal gland. So, siya ang pinaka mo regulate po of the glands. No? So, regulates the amount of fear, thirst, sexual drive, and aggression. Remember, no, the glands that we discussed in the previous slides, no, the sexual drive is because of the kanang gonads, no, gonadotropin na hormone, no, and fear and thirst and etc. So that is the hypothalamus. And then the amygdala influences our motivation, emotional control, fear response, and interpretations of nonverbal emotional expressions. Okay? This one here. Next is hippocampus. Plays a role in our learning, memory, and ability to compare sensory information to expectations. So as you can see, more on this is like the emotion. Ang hippocampus ang learning, na siya, more siya mini brain, no? Mini frontal lobe na siya. Learning and memory and makakompare og sensory information. And we also have the cingulate cortex, this one right here. Kani siya. And yang kuan is primary cortical component of the limbic system and it involves emotional and cognitive processing. So kasagaran jud sa core functions sa limbic system kaninila is with regards to emotion, processing of kanang motivation and mga other fear response, thirst, etc. So next is the cortex. Kani siya side view ni siya. Pero if you look at the brain, nana siya duha ka hemispheres as mentioned, di ba? It's connected by the corpus callosum, and which is the bridge, no, for the two hemispheres to connect. We also have a contralateral organization. O say meaning aning contralateral organization? Meaning, ang motor functions sa left is processed by the right brain. Ang motor function sa right is processed by the left brain. So, ana siya, no? Ana. X. Okay? So, I think, siya no, wrong ang pagkabutang. So, mana siya meaning sa contralateral organization. Mana siya ang characteristics sa kanang brain. Pero usahay pod na ay mga stimuli na i-process sa both brains, which we call bilateral organization. And as of now, the research is not yet there para to identify nganong nganong mag-interchange man ang brains in processing information. Pero nganong naama po stimuli na i-process sa both. They just found out lang na example sa ears, no, it's processed by both brains, probably to get a sense of the position sa body or sa sound na kung kusog diri, probably the sound is near here. Kung kusog sa pikas, probably the sound is near here. Ana siguro no na ay like evolutionary aspect towards it. But as of now, again, the research is still lacking as to why the brain receives and process information in this regard, no, contralateral organization. Now, the cortex has 4 lobes, no. Its name is derived from the position kung asa siya na sits sa skull. So, of course, the frontal lobe sits in the front part sa kuan, so it's called frontal lobe. Temporal lobe right here, parietal lobe right here, and medyo makover po niya ang somatosensory cortex, and the occipital lobe right here. Now, the occipital lobe is responsible for processing primary visual kanang cortex, no, rather processes vision. So everything you see will be relayed by the thalamus here. And the parietal is responsible for the touch, no, the body temperature, no, and your position sa body. Okay? And it also contains the somatosensory cortex. And the temporal is behind the temples, right here. And it is responsible for your hearing and language. And the frontal lobe is your CAO. And at the prefrontal cortex, kani siya na part here. And it's responsible for planning. It's also where your personality is and your decision, and of course language. Now, the right side of the brain is, if with regards to kanang language, no, and kuan, more on the vision side na siya. We will talk about that later. If wala siya sa slide, I'll just share it lang verbally. But for now, let's proceed to the next slide. Kanande ay naagyo ay siya, no? Okay, so language and the 2 hemispheres. Okay, so sa left frontal lobe, na ay Broca's area. Okay, let's look at here. So there is siya na part. Okay, so unsa nang Broca's area? The Broca's area lets you produce speech. So damage to it will result in you knowing what to say pero dili mo pronounce the words properly, or you entirely leave a word out. So if I read this, or rather, if I want to say this, left brain versus right brain personalities is a myth. If I have a damage to my Broca's area, I would say left run versus personalities. Myth. Okay, so mana siya, ma-leave out ang words or di ma-pronounce tarong ang words. Next is the Wernicke's area, which is located in the left temporal lobe right here. So left siya usually, no, for most people, 90% of the time. Others, na makitaan sa ilahang right. But for most, na siya sa left hemisphere. So this one is, it lets you understand the meaning. It makes you make sense of the word. So ang damage ani, makes you speak fluently pero the words will not make sense. So mo na gitawag na Broca's aphasia, damage to the Broca's area, and Wernicke's aphasia, damage to the Wernicke's area. So say both pasabot ani. Example, mo na ko left brain versus right brain personalities is a myth. So kung nako'y damage sa Wernicke's area man ako, pencil to the right and the vase in the left. Eat right now. Okay? Pero para nako, I'm talking about this one. Pero sa naminaw ni mo to yung madunggan. Pencil to the right and vase to the left. Eat right now. So it does not make sense. You're speaking the words fluently but you're not making any sense. Right? Next is kanang, so the brain then, ang nakitaan sa scientist or neuroscientist, ang left hemisphere usually decodes language, logic, or any sequential information. So, analytical kayo ang left brain. So, kanang, ang iya pong i-control, I remember the contralateral organization in the motor aspect, ay lang i-control is ang right side sa body. So kung right-handed ka, left brain ang control ana sa imong motor skills no sa or fine motor skills sa imong right hand. So the right hemisphere is more on recognition of faces and patterns, emotional tone or spatial awareness, and it controls the left side of the body. So we have to be careful about the myth ba na left brain versus right brain. It's not true because ang both sides work together. So remember katong foundations na to, katong Gestalt na schools of thought, Gestalt and also structuralist. So si left hemisphere, it decodes information like a structuralist. Ganan niya ibungkag, no? Sequential. Analyze niya, analytical siya. Pero si right, ganahan siya gestalt. Ganahan siya the totality, no? Or the whole picture. Iyang gustong pag-understand sa information. Manang naigiingon na naapoy ka ng common myth, and I don't know if that's found out already, na if kung left-handed ka, meaning kanang right part dominant nimo. So meaning ana artist ka, 'di ba? So you're more creative. And kung right-handed ka is left ang dominant nimo, so more on analytical ka. But I don't think that's true because I am both, no? I believe I am creative, I'm into arts, but I also analyze. Especially for psychology, no, kay holistic man ang development gyud sa mga psych students. So mga gwapa-gwapo pa, 'di ba? Asa ka na gwapa-gwapo, tapos makasabot pag emotions sa tao, makasabot og understand sa circumstance, makabasa og body language, mga artistic, creative, tapos analytical pa kay naman ni math side, 'di ba? So sortiha ba? So na siya. So here's a discussion question. Damage to Broca's area means you can't get words out. Damage to Wernicke's means you speak fluently but you don't make sense. What does this tell us about how the brain organizes a single scale like language? And that's the last discussion question for our session today. So please pause the video and verbalize your thought. And we're done. No? These are our key takeaways. Number 1, neurons are the messengers. Dendrites receive, axons send. Messages cross the synapse using a chemical called neurotransmitters. And the CNS involves the brain and the spinal cord. PNS, from the word peripheral, it's everything around or surrounding the CNS. Sympathetic is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is your rest. No, it's your it's your normal body functions, parasympathetic. And then hormones travel by blood and powerfully shape behavior. And your brain is plastic. It rewards itself from experience. That's it. Thank you everyone for listening and see you on the next video.